Hello everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Destiny video. Today Fantasy Flight released a few more spoilers for Spirit of Rebellion, so we're just going to go through those cards right now. First up, we have the Guavian Enforcer. This is from The Force Awakens. These are Politic's like bodyguards, henchmen, whatever you want to call them. They start with 9 health. They are worth 8 points, and they have 1 range damage, 2 range damage, plus 1 range damage, plus 1 resource, and the blank. And as an action, you can remove this die to remove 1 shield from a character. That ability I really like, especially if you're playing against like a Qui-Gon deck. And Qui-Gon, if he has a shield, he can then use his ability to remove shields to do damage. Or before you get a shield, you remove one, do a damage, and then get that shield. If they only have 1 shield on Qui-Gon, you can remove this die. Say you rolled a +1 resource or a blank and no other sides to resolve it with. You can remove this die to get rid of Qui-Gon's shield to prevent him from using his ability, at least for a little bit. I like the damage sides. Got 3 damage sides, so 2 normal damage sides and a +1. I can see this pairing with Elite Politic, of course. That's kind of thematic because they're his henchmen. Or you can run this with like Elite Jabba, have Jabba do his milling while these guys are doing damage and also getting rid of shields. So these are the Guavian Enforcers. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have IG-88, Assassin Droid, 12 health, so very high health. With high health, though, comes a high point cost, so he's either 15 or 20, depending on if you want to run him at a single die or at his elite die for 20 points. He has 2 range damage, 3 range damage, a shield, 2 shields for a resource, which is pretty interesting, and a special. The special is pretty awesome. So play a yellow weapon or a weapon or equipment from your discard pile on this character, decreasing its cost by 2. So let's say you used a thermal detonator earlier and it blew up, goes to your discard pile. You can then use IG-88 special to get that thermal detonator back and only have to pay 1 for it. And this set has a lot of new yellow villain equipment that you're going to be able to put on him as well. So I really like his health. His health is 12. He's got some pretty good damage sides, so 2 and a 3. I would have liked to see maybe have seen 1 more damage side, like maybe like a 3 for a resource or like a +1 or something like that. The shields for a resource is interesting. So you can pay a resource, get 2 shields, put him on IG-8, put him on IG-88, put him on some other character. But his ability is what makes him really cool. I like the fact that you can even discard like a yellow equipment to do a reroll, and then when you get IG-88 special, or if you use cunning, you can actually trigger this as well to get what you just discarded back and put it on IG-88. I think his points are pretty high, but he's got some good damage sides and some good faces on his dice, so I think his points are fairly balanced. So I could see people running him like maybe Bala-Tick, like a normal 1 die Bala-Tick and a 2 die IG-88 build. So, you're looking at, I think, 28 points for 24 IG-88, 8 for Bala. And if IG-88 is hitting stuff with his range damage and any other, weapons you put on him, you're going to then be able to reactivate Bala-Tick as well. So that's IG-88. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next we have Unkar Plutt, Junk Dealer. 10 health, either 10 or 13 points if you want to run him at Elite. So right away, he'll pair with Elite Unkar Plutt and Elite Jabba. And he has a Focus, a Disrupt, 2 Disrupt, a Resource, plus 2 resources, and a blank. And has an action, remove any number of your dice showing a combined value of 3 or more. Then discard a random card from an opponent's hand and gain resources equal to its cost. So this could pay off really big, or it can also kind of fizzle on you. So let's say you have 3 range damage, and you don't have any range, any normal damage sewing. You can remove that +3 range damage, discard a card, and then get resources equal to whatever the card costs. So, of course, if you discard something big like a Falcon or an ATST, you're going to be getting 5 or 6 resources. But if you discard something like an Intimidate, you're going to get 0 resources. So there is a risk associated with using his ability. However, if you kind of know what's in your opponent's hand, like if you were to somehow play a card that let you look at their hand, and then let's say they discard something, you know what the other card's going to cost, so then you can use that, either choose to use his ability or not, depending on how many resources you're going to get out of it. You kind of have to weigh, is it worth removing dice with a value of 3 or more, so you can remove 3 dice that have a value of 1, and that works, or you can remove 1 die that has a value of 3. That would work too, but you just have to kind of weigh if it's worth getting rid of those dice in order to get potential resources. Because if you get rid of some dice and you get, like I said, you draw Intimidate or some 0 cost event, you're not going to get any resources, and you will have removed those dice for nothing essentially. But I think this card's pretty interesting. I like that he has Disrupt, like a 2 Disrupt sides. You can also focus him into something else or focus another die into something else. And I think he's going to pair very well with Jabba, so you can get rid of get rid of resources, mill cards, and if you're milling cards, might know what they have in their hand depending on, if you're using like certain abilities that'll let you see. You can be like, okay, he's got a 3 cost upgrade in his hand. I'm going to use his ability and get 3 resources. Also, I do like his resource sides. So you have a 1 resource and a +2. So he's a junk dealer. So he's essentially like getting extra like scrap to sell essentially. So that's how he gets his money essentially, like that. I like his sides. I think the focus is good, his disrupt is good, and then I do like his resource sides as well. So you can get, if you rolled out 2 of his dice, let's say you rolled a 1 resource and a +2 resource, you can resolve that for 3 resources. So I think we're going to see really kind of expensive upgrades and like supports in a deck that is running him. Like you're probably going to be seeing stuff like Slave Ones and things like that. Things that cost quite a few resources because he's able to potentially, just on his own dice, get 3 resources if you resolve, his 1 resource and his +2. So that's Unkar Plutt. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next up we have Blackmail, Yellow Villain Upgrade. It's legendary. 3 resources. 2 mill, 2 discard, 3 discard, 2 disrupt, 3 disrupt, 3 shields, and a blank. And after you roll this die, any opponent may give you 1 resource to remove it. So that can kind of be a negative. You will be getting resources, but you will be removing the die. I think this is going to go really well with Unkar Plutt because you could, let's say, put this on Jabba, roll Unkar Plutt out, disrupt all their resources, and then have this on Jabba or something like that, roll this out, and your opponents aren't going to have a resource to give you, so you're going to be able to potentially get a lot more disrupt or a lot more mill. Like you got 2 mill, 3 mill, also 3 shields. So really strong sides. I probably wouldn't roll it out if your opponents had resources because you are getting a resource if they don't want to get all the resources disrupted or milled, but you're then going to remove that die. So I think it's probably best to disrupt their resources first. If you run this, let's say with something like blue-yellow, you can do like Abandon All Hope. If they choose the resource option, you can then play Blackmail on a character, roll that character out, and just start disrupting even more and milling. Like I said, if you have it out and they have resources, they're just going to pay that resource to give it to have you remove the die. So Blackmail, I actually really like it a lot. I think it's going to go well, like I said, with Unkar Plutt and like a Jabba mill deck. You're going to probably have, Elite Jabba, Elite Unkar with probably a couple of these, and then you're just going to mill all day long pretty much. I really like Blackmail. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next up, we have Personal Shield. 2 resources, Yellow Villain, which is kind of surprising to me. When this card was partially spoiled back in January, I was thinking it was going to be neutral. Kind of surprised that it's just villain. Anyway, 2 resources. It's an upgrade equipment. 1 shield, 2 shield, 3 shield for a resource, and 2 blanks. And the ability of before the attached character is dealt 2 or more range damage, you may exhaust this upgrade to give that character 1 shield. So before you roll this character out, if there's range damage being resolved against you, you can exhaust it to get a shield. I like that it has, essentially this is kind of like, not quite a villain diplomatic immunity because you can't spread the shields out, but it's really nice because you have 3 sides that give shields plus the ability as well. So I like Personal Shield. I I think it's going to go really well in decks that don't do a lot of damage. So, like Unkar Java is going to benefit from this quite a bit because they're Unkar and Java on their own don't really do damage unless they have like equipment on them. So this is going to go nicely on them to essentially negate a lot of like incoming damage, especially if you get that 3 shield side for a resource. Especially with Unkar Plutt because he has that resource side and that +2 resource side. You should be able to pay for the 3 shield cost fairly frequently. So if you put one of these on Unkar, one of these on Jabba, you can keep them both shielded, and then continue just to disrupt and mill. So that's Personal Shield. I like this card quite a bit. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Vibro Knuckles. 3 resources, yellow villain, weapon upgrade. 1 melee damage, another 1 melee damage, 2 melee damage, discard, 1 discard, and 2 discard. It also has ambush, so you get to do another action after you play it. And before resolving this die, you may spend the resource to increase its value by 1. This is pretty interesting as well. A lot of these cards are going to basically go in, I think, like Unkar and Jabba decks, because this gives whatever character you attach it to, it gives it damage, melee damage, and it also gives it 2 more discard sides. Plus, if you're getting a bunch of resources from Unkar anyway, you'll be able to pay a resource to increase this value by 1. So if you roll the 2 damage side, you can pay a resource and have it do 3 damage. So those are the Vibro Knuckles. I really like them. I think if I already have 2 Jabbas, if I get 2 Unkars, I'm going to try to build a mill deck out of them. I think they would be a very nice like mill, essentially like a denial deck. And this card, the Vibro Knuckles, will help with that as well because you get 2 more mill sides plus damage, so you can actually dish some damage out and not just get killed right away. So those are the Vibro Knuckles. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next up we have Arms Deal. Yellow villain event, 0 resources. Discard any number of weapons from your hand, then gain 1 resource for each card you just discarded. So if you really need resources and you have some extra guns in your hand, you can play this, discard those guns, and get resources. This is going to work well, I believe, with IG-88. So let's say you have a thermal detonator in hand and like a Vibro Knuckles. And let's say you discard both, you get 2 resources. And then later, you roll out IG-88 Special, you're then able to play those upgrades and decrease their cost by 2. So if you really need resources and you have a few extra guns in your hand, you can use this. I think this is going to be very situational. I don't know how many decks are actually going to run this, but I think it's going to be a good card to include with IG-88 because you can get those weapons back. Or if you're playing on Starship Graveyard, you can get resources, later claim the battlefield, put one of those weapons back on top of your deck. So that is Arms Deal. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Bait and Switch, yellow villain event again, 0 resources, has ambush, so you get a second action after you play it, and turn 1 of your dice showing a resource to any side. So you can kind of use this to kind of lure your opponent into a false sense of security, kind of. Let's say you're playing Vader Raider, you roll out Vader, he lands on his resource side. Your opponent might look at that and be like, okay, that's just a resource. I'm not going to remove it if he doesn't like you. I'm not going to electroshock it or anything like that. So they leave that die in the pool. It goes back to your turn. You play Bait and Switch, then take that resource die and put it on Vader's 3 melee side. And since it has ambush, you can then go ahead and resolve that die, and you resolve 3 damage. It would be a really fun way to win a game if you just had, like I said, Vader on his resource and your opponent had 1 character left with 3 health, and you played Bait and Switch, turned it to 3, hit your opponent's character for 3, and won the game. So this is a pretty interesting card. So you can also use it to chain stuff together. So if you had a bunch of let's say it might work even with range damage. So let's say you have a couple modified range damage and a resource side. You can play Bait and Switch, turn the resource side to range damage, and then be able to resolve the range damage plus all the modified damage too. So that's Bait and Switch. We're going to move into our next card. And the final card revealed today was Friends in High Places. Yellow villain again, 0 resources. Play only if you have dice showing a combined value of 7 or more. So that's a going to be a big negative on this. Is you have to have a pretty good roll with combined values on your dice of 7 or higher. If you do, you get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may play one of those cards for free and discard the cards you don't play. So this could be pretty interesting, especially if you were to somehow give this ambush. So like Infamous, give this ambush. Look at look at your deck. Play another card that has ambush, or another like thing that has ambush on it, and then be able to potentially resolve whatever you had in your pool that was equal to 7 or more. I think it's going to be very situational. It kind of like planned explosion, where I don't think this is going to be successful very often. But if it is successful, it's going to be successful in a huge way. It's going to be interesting to see how this card plays out once it comes out, and what kind of decks it gets put in. Especially if you have that much in your dice pool of that value, it's probably going to get removed, or at least some of it. So even if you only, let's say you have a value of 7, your opponent removes one of those dice, it's going to drop the value, making friends in high places harder to play, because you're going to potentially have to roll something else out, or like focus into a higher side on something, and things like that. But it is pretty interesting. Like I said, with Planned Explosion, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays, to see if this is actually a card that will be worth being included in decks. I don't particularly think it will be, but it will be interesting to see if any decks start running it. And that is the final card that was spoiled today. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll be back next time. Until then, I want you to take care. Have a good one.